When you say, Stan in Amherst, it's, Stan Ziomek. He was not only this important figure for all of the families that had children that played youth baseball, but he was the head of the Department of Public Works, which is an extremely important position in town. So if there were potholes or snow to be removed or leaves to be picked up, Stan was the person that was in charge. And when it was time to pick up Little League uniforms, you went to the Department of Public Works to pick them up because that was his office. That's where he operated out of. So everybody got very used to him in both of those positions. But he's been an important, really, unlike anybody else that I can think of in the town of Amherst for decades.
There was no organized baseball until when I joined Little League in 1954, and I'm not quite sure when it started, but I think it started in 52 or 3 or somewhere around then. It was quite exciting for all of us young boys at that time to have something that was organized, because we played with whatever we could find for bases. We played with generally a broken bat that somebody'd put a screw into and wrap some black tape around. We might have a baseball that was still had some string in it. We may not, but it was all unorganized. And Little League for us, and Stan in general, and the other 3 or 4 men, it seems to me, that came together and made Little League happen in Amherst was really an exciting event.
Prior to Stan being involved with the youth, a fellow by the name of Steve Kozakowski worked both at the boys' club and in the summers with those of us who were young kids at the time, and it was very, very informal. Show up and play, and once in a while you might have enough people to have a game, or you might play against some kids from Hadley. However, it was very informal, and then Stan, who was a very close friend, I think, of Steve Kozakowski's, I think they both got together and thought and watched the national scene and felt that Amherst was ready to formally organize their Little League and eventually a Babe Ruth.
Yeah, first of all, even before the program got started, okay, Stan had everybody organized. First off, they took that field out there that, like Donnie mentioned, it was a pasture. It was part of Swartz's pasture, I think. And they took that field, and Stan organized us into building the fence, okay, digging the sod, building the pitcher's mound, all this he had. I don't know, there must have been I just remember a lot of men and a lot of kids, a lot of us kids were there helping build the fence. We'd be lugging this lumber to be put up, or lugging the sod, or helping out in any way we could. So Stan got everybody organized in a sense that just in building the field and getting excited about Little League even before it started.
I think Stan was probably in his late 20s. He certainly seemed like an older man at the time. Today he seems like maybe a very young man at the time. But Stan was everywhere. We all the young boys knew Stan because he was Little League baseball. But I also knew Russ Christensen very well. I knew Nellie Jenks very well, and I knew Bud Jewett fairly well. Bud was a postmaster in town, and those were the 4 people that I remember that were truly Little League baseball. But Stan was the out front guy. Stan was the organizer. Stan was the guy who really wore all the hats. He found sponsors. He held tryouts. He found coaches. He umpired himself. He solicited money and got kids to knock on doors in uniforms at the early part of the season so they had enough money to buy equipment. Stan really was, for us youngsters at that time, Stan was the guy.
We would have each year the tryouts at Amherst College in March for the baseball program for the upcoming season, and Stan would have the boys stand and there and in a line, and he would call out their names and check off their names and as being in attendance. And then from there, they would go to do different types of drills. And Stan could remember every single one of those children's names and called them by name, and always had an encouraging word. Whether the ball went through their legs 4 times or not, wouldn't matter. He would always give them an encouraging voice of, and so I always thought that was a wonderful tribute. And maybe it was part of his Polish heritage, but he could always pronounce all those names on that list.
Requiring everybody to play was something that Stan really understood and didn't object to and encouraged, because he wanted everybody to play. He wanted everybody to have a piece of this thing that he loved so much. And I think, by introducing kids to this sport early on, even though they weren't great athletes, they had an interest in the game that maybe they had forever. And I think that was as much of Stan's mission as, just having everybody play. He wanted everybody to enjoy the game, and he was great at introducing everybody to the game in that way, because they made sure everybody did play. They had to play. And, being sure that pitchers didn't pitch too much and hurt their arms at a young age. Those are the kinds of things that Stan was certainly attuned to and cautious of, because it wasn't just about winning. It was learning how to lose sometimes, because we all lose, and learning how to lose was just as important as learning how to win.
My youngest son, who was he was always either number 1 or number 3, because they gave numbers according to size place, how tall you were, and he was a bit of a small guy, and not the best player, but he was a good sport, and he got an award for sportsmanship, and I thought that was terrific, that award would be as important as how many home runs you hit or how many people you could strike out in a game.
He was always in it for the kids. Whatever was able to get more kids involved. For the Amherst program, we competed against each other, but it didn't matter who won in the end, as long as the kids had fun. So it was a competitive spirit, but also always in it for the kids.
I talk about young boys, but I have a daughter that played Little League baseball in the 70s. At some point, Stan recognized that this should be a sport for young women as well as young boys, and he didn't seem to have an issue with that. He recognized that, if they want to play, they want to play, and they can be good athletes just as well as the boys can. And so there was an integration that took place. So I've watched Stan change, his philosophy and the way he's been able to manage this whole baseball, Little League baseball thing, youth baseball thing in Amherst is really quite amazing, and 60 years is just unheard of.
When the game was over, the teams always lined up and shook each other's hands. There was a sense of, yes, we're trying to beat each other, but we're also being decent and civil to each other, because that's how people behave.
One of the interesting things that would happen every afternoon is that because Stan had all these different ball fields with different games going on, he also was in charge of assigning the umpires for the games. And some were much more dependable than others, but about 5 o'clock, Stan would probably have a call from one of the coaches, or 6 o'clock, that would say, gee, the umpire hasn't showed up. And so sure enough, Stan was out making his rounds, going from Ziomek Field to the Little League fields and the like. And so more often than not, Stan would be filling in as the umpire for either because someone didn't show up.
He'd call it like he sees it, and and he would not get them right all the time, but he was one of those, you couldn't really argue with him. It was just, he ran the whole thing. I mean, this whole baseball organization he's running, and so you don't really argue with him too much about whether that was a ball or a strike, or whether he was safe or out.
If a parent decided that they wanted to voice a concern from the sidelines, he may stop the game and go over and suggest that that wasn't the appropriate behavior for the parent, during the game.
There is breaking news just in the Sports Center, and this is big, big. Stan Ziomek has decided to call it a career. Stan, what are you thinking about? Announcing his retirement after 60-plus years running the Amherst Baseball Leagues. Congratulations.
It warms our heart that Coach and Leaves are your two favorite Sports Center anchors. It really does.
I don't think he said that.
He didn't?
No.
It says it right here. But you know what? ESPN's first broadcast, Leaves, was in 1979 at Sports Center. So that means Stan's been involved in baseball longer than ESPN's been on the air. For more analysis, and very good analysis, let's send it over to the Baseball Tonight guys.
All right, thanks, guys. You know, Doug, this guy has been a rock in the community for so long.
Well, I mean, I played Little League for what seemed to be forever, and it was such a great contributor to my experience in my community. Took a lot of pride, and I think of Babe Ruth in the same light. So to actually work with kids this long and to have that type of impact for an unbelievable legacy is a credit to Stan. It's really, truly amazing.
Yeah, it's been timeless. He's been doing this since 1952, and for perspective, famous players born that year include Fred Lynn, Jerry Remy, Ray Knight, and current Rangers manager Ron Washington. On behalf of Doug Glanville, I'm Adnan Burke. Congratulations, Stan, on an incredible achievement and a life well deserved.
He would go to all the games. His sons were playing usually. I guess what stands out the most was when we were playing Legion or Senior Babe Ruth, I think it was called for 1 year. But we did that, and I think John and Andrew were playing in that. And so Stan would be at the games, and he'd be sitting up in his chair in back of home plate up on the hill.
Jasper Adams was facing Nick Ahmed in a baseball game, and I was talking to him, and then he was talking to Stan sitting up on the hill in his chair. You know, he rules the roost from up on the top of the hill. And so I was asking him a lot of questions about, you know, why he's here. This scout. I mean, this is where I met Stan. But I was asking the scout, why is he here? And he told me, well, I'm looking at these two guys. He goes, but you know what? The best pitcher here is a little freshman on the bench over there, that Kevin Ziomek, Stan's grandson. He says he's going to be better than all of them. I'm like, yeah, right. But I guess he was right. So I guess these pro scouts really know their stuff, even when the kids are freshmen in high school.
We're sitting in the ballpark, minor league ballpark up in Lowell. There had to be 400 or 500 Amherst fans at that ball game that night, June night back in 2010. And I recorded the ninth inning, the last 3 outs of that game on my iPhone, posted it up to YouTube, and Kevin retired the last 3 batters, and the Amherst High School kids who I had, had the opportunity to coach for a number of these years, so we're celebrating, and I turned my camera down to my right, down the row, and Stan was being greeted by several generations of Amherst people coming up to him and congratulating him on this great milestone for Amherst baseball and for his family to watch his grandson do so well. It really brought tears to my eyes watching that scene because it was such a quintessential Stan Ziomek moment and wonderful moment in the history of our town.
Every time I see Stan, I say, hey, Stan, how's Kevin doing? It's a miracle. I can't believe it's a miracle. I mean, we've all heard that. But it's not a miracle. The kid had it in him, but the Stan Ziomeks of the world gave him the opportunities to be who he is and who he's becoming.
Besides being a public official and working for the town, he went far beyond that, in terms of the number of hours, and that was very unique. And I think it's very unique at that time as well as today. I don't think we have the same level of volunteerism as we had back in the 50s and 60s when Stan was initiating so many of these programs.
A whole bunch of people gathered in a room at the Bank Center to talk about how we might organize the 250th celebration. And of course, Ziomek speaks up and said, well, make Robert's chair and let's get going. And I looked at him and I said, Stan, if I'm chair, you're co-chair. And that's how that one got going. And then we had a great committee that Stan helped me put together, and we think a great celebration.
So. Stan has always been so much involved in the community fair. I think that it's an event that has been happening since I was a little boy, and Stan's always been the leader of that, representing the Rotary Club.
There was a lot of humor, a lot of joking around. Stan was the sergeant at arms and has been in the 20 years I've been involved with Rotary. And so he would go around, and if your picture was in the newspaper or something happened that he heard about, and he heard everything, he had his finger on the pulse of the town, you would get fined $1.
And that dollar goes into the fund that goes for educational scholarships.
Mr. Ziomek, thank you very much for all that you've done.
Stan, thank you so much for all that you've done for all of us.
Well, thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you for being who you are, and thank you for what you've done over the past 50, 60 years.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for Stan, for all the influence you had in my life.
You've been a big influence on a lot of people, on a lot of kids, and those kids have become parents, and they're an influence on their kids and their grandkids, and you've done a lot. And you've done a lot for many people, more than you know, more than you can ever count, because your influence is compounded with, like I said, numerous other people.
You've played a very important role in not only our lives, but in the lives of our family. My two boys who are not here this evening extend their appreciation as well. Baseball was a very important part of their lives, and we just have a lot to be grateful for, and we're just delighted that we can be here this evening to share this wonderful evening with you and your family and wonderful boys that you have, and look forward to many more cups of coffee at the Route 9 Diner or Atkins on Sunday morning.
When I think about how privileged I am to be serving as town manager right now, knowing that I'm in a town with people like Stan Ziomek, it makes it a wonderful place to live and work and raise a family.
I certainly would simply like to join so many people and the entire community in saying a word of appreciation for all that Stan has done and the remarkable career he has had in his public service, as well as in the area of developing the baseball programs, which I believe are second to none. And we are so grateful for what he has done for our young people.